Welcome to the second part of my series on how to become a Mythic Raider. I suggest you check out part 1 if you haven't seen it already, as this series is designed that it flows from first to second, so I'll assume you've already watched that. Your class and your spec has an enormous impact on your ability to find a raiding guild. You're probably sitting there thinking, I should choose the most OP class. If anything, this is the worst thing you can do. First off, OP specs will have massive competition for a slightly increased number of spots, only for in the near future to be obliterated out of existence or at least reduced to mediocrity. And as such, choosing the OP class means that in the very near future you'll have to find yourself re-rolling again to become the new OP class. Alternatively, you could choose a class on the basis of things that will stick around for the long term. There is a benefit to choosing a pure DPS class and a hybrid class, regardless of if you intend to only DPS. Having 3 DPS specs gives you a greater chance of any particular spec being highly tuned. However, an increased chance of having a higher tuned spec is worth extremely little compared to the ability to switch roles on a raid night where your tank or your healer can't make it. A minor difference in damage tuning won't cancel a raid night. Not having a tank, of course, will. Of course, if you have no interest in ever tanking or healing, then I would highly suggest you choose a pure DPS. If you're willing to main a healing spec, it will also massively improve your ability to get a good guild. Low to medium tier mythic guilds struggle a lot to recruit quality healers due to healers at this level of play completely misunderstanding their role. They mistakenly believe that their job is solely to heal and not to support the raid in any other way. There is a reason why at the top end, healers are now more judged on their ability to do damage than actual healing. On the other end of the spectrum, getting into a guild as a tank is almost impossible. This is due to the fact you only need 2, so you can't really have a bench without having to rotate people constantly. What this means is most guilds will elect to have only 2 tanks and will expect them to have perfect attendance and be one of the best players in the guild. This means that guilds are not willing to try you out if you have no experience, and as such, getting into a guild as a tank with no experience is almost impossible. When you compare it to a DPS or healer, who there is some bench flexibility, which means that they are willing to give you a greater chance, as it is much easier to just get someone in to replace you as they already have someone waiting on the bench. Overall, this means that if you want to improve your chances of getting into a guild, play a healer and don't try and play a tank. Even if you really want to be a tank, you're probably going to have a better luck just applying for a guild as a DPS or a healer and then switching to tank later on once you have more experience. Next thing you should look at is how difficult is the spec you want to play. In general, the harder to play spec will allow players who are better to stand out more. A good example of this is a Discipline Priest, which is regarded as being much more difficult than the other healers due to the fact that it has a predictive playstyle. On the other end of the spectrum, if you want to be lazy or hide any imperfections, it is highly recommended that you play an easy class, as there is a very small difference between a good player and a great player. If you want to join a guild that requires you to have 2 characters, then the decision becomes even harder, as you also have to consider whether the second class complements the first. There's no point in having 2 classes that function practically the same. So for example, you might want to have one class that is melee while the other is ranged, one that is good at AoE, or one that is good at single target, or one that brings a different piece of unique utility. These are all things that should be considered when you're trying to select 2 classes. It is also highly advisable, if you're going to choose 2 classes, that you ensure that you have at least 1 healer and 1 tank spec, in case you ever happen to need those. To sum it up, a healer is the easiest to find a guild with and a tank the hardest. If you're going to go for a single class, it is highly advisable that you choose one with the ability to perform at least 2 roles, if not 3. If you're going to have a second character, choose one that complements the first and try to ensure that all the basic class types are covered: your healer, DPS, ranged and melee, and a tank. Check out part 3, which will explain how to build a good UI for Mythic raiding.